You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 324. And in this one, I got on Pamela, who has kindly agreed to share her story with us. And in particular, we talk about stress in childhood, growing up in a religious upbringing. We discuss her early memories of OCD and what that was like in childhood, getting a diagnosis. We talk about trichotillomania, depression, and PTSD. She shares her compulsions and worries. We go into medication and exposure and response prevention therapy, and so much more. And thank you to NoCD for supporting the podcast. NoCD offers affordable, effective, and convenient therapy available in the US and outside the US. To find out more about NoCD, their therapy plans, if they currently take your insurance, or to download their free app, head over to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories, or the link will be in the episode description. And thank you to Pamela. I really enjoyed hearing her story. And thank you to you guys. As always, I deeply appreciate it. And without further ado, here is Pamela. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. And, I'd love to hear your OCD story, and you can share it now in as little or as much detail as you want to go into.
For sure. So I began having symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder when I was 8 years old. And I think what really set the stage for OCD to come into my life was the high levels of stress that I experienced throughout my childhood. And then the compiled traumas throughout that my 8-year-old self can process is what really kicked it off. And growing up in a Christian household, that was the very first thing my OCD latched onto. And that was my main theme until I was in my late teens. And I actually ended up, walking away from that upbringing as a Christian just because of what it represented, like that difficult time in my life. It was just a reminder of trauma.
Yeah.
But when I was 8 years old, as with most sufferers, I didn't know it was OCD at the time. I just knew that I wasn't like other kids in my neighborhood or in my grade. I was pretty odd, I guess you'd say. And eventually, as the disorder progressed and got worse, even though I didn't know what crazy meant at the time, I just concluded that I had to be. Like, who else has these like wild thoughts and assumptions? And yeah, no one around me seemed to catch on to how much I was struggling. And I realized today that's still very true, because I've just become so skilled at masking what was going on in my mind, as well as I'm sure a lot of OCD sufferers can relate to this, is I felt like my OCD wouldn't let me share, like I wasn't allowed to. So I had to keep a lot of it under wraps. I had to censor a lot of what I talked about. And yeah, so I didn't receive a diagnosis until 8 years later when I was 16. I was at a point where I just couldn't cope anymore. I was struggling with, self-harm and suicidal ideation. And I remember just feeling like my mind was just so loud and I just couldn't think straight anymore. So I did go to see my doctor and she confirmed it was OCD. And then last year I went for another psychiatric assessment to see if there's like accompanying disorders, as there often is with OCD. And so I found out that, there's also trichotillomania, depression, and PTSD.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a lot of relief in getting these diagnoses, but I'm still kind of processing and going through the whole grief of knowing that it's OCD, because it's huge. And that's something I don't think a lot of OCD sufferers can wrap their head around because it's just so beyond us and so traumatizing.
Yeah. Like just the experience of OCD.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
its first onset and like all the way throughout, like the kind of thoughts you have.
Mm.
Um, it's shocking at times.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. To think these things that go against who we are, you know. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So, yeah, you mentioned, the effectively the trauma of just having OCD there,
Right.
and then at the start of your journey, it was, from right in saying, the traumatic events or experiences that you feel maybe led to the OCD or triggered it. Is that,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah?
it was definitely trauma induced.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was, as the way you said, it was like your 8-year-old brain couldn't comprehend or cope with those experiences, and maybe that's what gave rise to the OCD. That,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely lacked like a lot of the support and resources I needed.
Okay.
Um, so I think in its own weird way, OCD was trying to like support me and protect me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And that effectively OCD is just the brain trying to keep us safe, you know,
Right.
whether it was trauma induced or not, it's just trying to, it feels there's a fear and it wants to protect us, which is why it's flooding us with anxiety because it wants us to run or fight in its
Exactly.
simplest form. Yeah. Doesn't
Right.
make it any easier, but that's
It's very
uh,
true.
yeah. So your core themes were, you mentioned around religion there, right?
Right.
And it was also contamination and harm, I believe.
It started as religion, but then when I stopped kind of following my family upbringing, like that kind of faith, it shifted to contamination, illness, and harm.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So
Yeah.
how did it manifest? Like, what did it look like? Just to illustrate it for the listeners, those different themes, or even actually before that, when it was focused on the religion, how was it like affecting your life or showing up?
Um, well, yeah, like being raised in a Christian household, I guess there was a lot of emphasis on the importance of, being a good person and,
Mm,
um, you know, doing our best to be like good community members and um, ensuring that we're kind of following like, everything that our religion entails. And so for
mm,
me, I just felt like um, I felt that I wasn't doing my part to be kind of like a good Christian. And
okay.
that's kind of how it started. But then it grew to, I thought I was like an evil person. I was always like sinning or,
Mm,
um, if I didn't do something a certain way, then like God would hate me. And as an 8-year-old, like who was still going to church and everything, that was terrifying
yeah.
because I felt like that no matter what I did, I was just this bad person that just God didn't love.
Mm, yeah. Gosh. Yeah. Absolutely. And then every Sunday, I'm guessing every Sunday, you've got this big trigger, which is going to church.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah. And as an 8-year-old, you can't necessarily get out of it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you have no idea what's even happening.
yeah. True. And what were some of the compulsions that you did around religion, religious worries?
Um, it was weird because like they weren't really connected to like religion, but like mainly my compulsions were it was a lot of repetition. So speaking, like I'd have to repeat sentences until I said them like a certain way. Um, there was a lot of avoidance and um one of the things that still kind of baffles me today is like I had a lot of like obsessive writing.
Okay.
So anytime I would write something down or like I was doing schoolwork, I'd have to keep repeating it until it was just right. Um, so that was very time consuming and my teachers didn't understand what was kind of going on with me at the time. Because even today, OCD is very like taboo and it's very misunderstood. And one thing that carried over was I have this weird obsession with like the light switch. So that hasn't changed through all the years.
Okay, so that's remained.
Yeah.
And where was I? Yeah, so with contamination, how what were some of the worries or compulsions and compulsions that you were doing around that?
Yeah. So contamination and harm are kind of like intertwined for me. And it's having this sort of like hyper responsibility for the people around me. Because I'm terrified of them getting a serious illness or getting contaminated. Um, so I tend to be like overly cautious about how I would hand them something, or if we were going into like a mall, I would grab the door handle ahead of them so they wouldn't have to touch it. Um, or, back to the light switch, turning it off and on a certain number of times so the house wouldn't burn down. Um, Overall, I was just terrified of not being able to keep the people closest to me safe. And that included me as well. Um, to this day, like I'm terrified of catching a serious illness from like touching elevator buttons or shopping carts, my own mail. Um, and also there's a select amount of words that kind of trigger anxiety for me. So I tend to either not say them or just practice avoidance around articles or things that might um, kind of contain those words.
Wow. And what's it like if someone says those words? Like, for example, let's say I've said one of them already that I'm not aware of. Would that bother you too? Or is it more if you say them or see them?
It's mainly if I see them or say them. Like
Mm.
there's still a little bit of discomfort whenever I hear them, but it's pretty manageable.
Yeah, fair enough. Have I said any of them?
No, no.
Okay, good. Well, they would be okay if I did, because
Yeah, yeah.
that's an exposure.
We'll be all
Um,
right.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, okay, so makes sense. So yeah, it was the contamination was really around, but contamination and harm seemed to really blend there. So it
Yeah,
was, you know, say some people with contamination would be worried about opening the door because of whatever's on it. You were worried, but it wasn't for your safety necessarily. It felt like it's more the people around you or people you care about.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting. But it did affect your safety too sometimes, hence the elevator buttons or the lift buttons. And
Yeah, like that was just to like name a few, but um the concerns are pretty out there. Like um I'm sure a lot of people with illness or contamination OCD can relate to this. It's kind of like if I touch the door, I can probably get like cancer or something. And so it's having that extreme kind of conclusion in your mind. Um, Even though it sounds illogical, like it's still frightening to think that you can even consider that the door handle can do that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it just shows you where the brain goes, isn't it? It sometimes doesn't even worry about things that maybe we should be worrying about, and it goes to things that unlikely ever to cause us any harm, but it's really latching on to those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
But terrifying because when that amygdala fires behind it, it makes it feel real.
Yeah. It's very convincing.
Exactly, yeah. So what was I say? So yeah, so you went back to get another assessment, and they found all these other comorbidities like depression, PTSD, and what was the other one I'm forgetting?
Trichotillomania.
Trichotillomania.
Yeah.
So where are you at now in kind of treatment or therapy or medication or anything like that?
Yeah. I just started ERP therapy.
Cool.
It took me a while to get into it. It's like waitlist and what have you. So pretty much my recovery started with trying to find the right medication. Um, and it was kind of discouraging at times because it took me around like six different medications to find the right combination. Um, but OCD is stubborn and, you know, it's not like a one size fits all, unfortunately. But where I am today, I definitely found like the right combination. Um, and then yeah, like I've started ERP therapy, so um, it's been great. It's been a learning curve.
Yeah.
Um, I'm definitely learning a lot about OCD. Like I thought, as someone who Googles like every little thing, I knew every like, kind of like nook and cranny about OCD. But going into therapy, it's a whole new perspective, and it gives you kind of that extra boost, like um, that you're able to like push back against OCD. That you're capable of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, the extra boost that the therapy can give and also it's someone like helping you specialize, if that's the right word, treatment or tailor it to you and your needs. And so
Exactly.
yeah, so how so you've just started it sounds like. How sort of far into it are you in terms of weeks, I
Um,
guess?
I started in late January, so I'm like roughly 2 months into it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, some days it feels very long and kind of dragging because you have to start with those baby steps and you can't
Yeah,
just do flooding and jump right into your worst fears.
good point.
But I can feel kind of the change in comparison to where I was even just 2 years ago.
That's awesome.
There's definitely a lot of growth and there's a lot of change.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear. And that's it, like you said, sometimes it's baby steps and we take and baby steps probably isn't even the right term because that almost sounds like it belittles it, but
Mhm.
it's it's small steps or manageable steps. And eventually those little steps add up and then we're taking big strides, you know.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, but it's great to hear you're already seeing a difference
Yeah.
compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And is that the therapist you see? Is that in person or online? How do you do that?
Due to COVID, it is online.
Okay.
um, so yeah, I still get a lot out of it. Um, I was definitely hoping it would be in person, in case, I had some difficulties with flooding or,
Okay. Yeah.
um, yeah, like if I had a lot of anxiety or like last week I kind of had like a little bit of a breakdown. It'd be kind of good to be in person for that.
Yeah. You mean to
But
break down in session or like between sessions?
during my
During.
session,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So okay. So you feel yeah, it would have been nicer to be in the same room and
yeah,
so
instead of like crying on Zoom.
yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And is that the whole of Canada currently won't allow in person, or is this just your therapist is saying not yet?
um, I don't know. It's kind of hit and miss with different therapists. I think mine prefers to
Okay.
be online,
Oh,
but
okay. So it's yeah,
yeah, I've
more
definitely
her
heard a couple
preference,
people. Yeah.
their preference.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Uh, okay, but no, it's going good. And then, so in terms of so therapy, and is there anything else you do day to day that you feel helps you with OCD or your general sort of well-being?
Um, it's interesting because I actually found that I have a bit of a skill with sketching, and that is something that's definitely helped me because, not only does it keep my hands busy, so I can't really, get compulsive, but focusing is really challenging for me. And so that's one of the things that I'm actually able to focus with
Hmm.
and direct my attention towards.
Okay. Yeah. That's really good to hear. And especially with like trichotillomania, I guess you do need to keep your hands busy sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I guess I'll just ask you a question about trick because it's not something that really comes up too much on the podcast. But it obviously is kind of a part of the OCD family, if we use that term.
Yeah.
Um, what does it look like for you? How does it manifest or show up?
So for me, um, trichotillomania is like it involves like hair pulling. And I'm not sure of the word for the other one, but I know there's like skin picking,
Oh,
but
dermatillomania.
yeah, well, that's a mouthful.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, for me, it's always been like the eyelashes. That's kind of something I've always done. And I always thought it was normal. I thought it was just like a quirk. I thought everyone does that because I was like, oh, I don't pull my hair. I'm like, I don't rip out patches. I'm like, I can't have that.
Mm.
But yeah, I found out that it can manifest through like pulling out your eyelashes or leg hair or what have you. It's not just isolated to the head.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Valid point. Yeah. It's anywhere effectively
Yeah.
that you have hair, I should
Yeah,
say.
exactly.
um, yeah. Okay. And what did that, in terms of OCD, sounds like it started around the age of 8 for you.
Mhm.
And when did trick kick in?
Um, I remember vividly it started when I was 14. But I didn't find out what it was until a couple months ago when I mentioned it to my doctor. I was like, "Hey, I'm like, do you think it's is normal to kind of like pull out your eyelashes or your hair?" And she's like, "Well, actually," she's like, "because you have OCD and you probably have trick as well." I was like, "Oh." So yeah, that was
Yeah.
pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have some understanding, of why you do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, with sketching, so yeah, it is kind of keeping your hands busy so you can't compulse. And is that sort of any free time you have, you're kind of sketching as you go, or do you make time for it? Or, yeah, what does that look like?
Um, I kind of just do it when like the inspiration hits me. Um, Yeah, my mind can be pretty like preoccupied, not just with OCD, but just like being a student and everything. My
Yeah.
mind's just kind of everywhere. Um, so it definitely takes some effort to carve out time for it. Um, but yeah, like I've been doing that for about 2 years now, and
Mm.
I always try to make time for it because it's one of the things that definitely helps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good to hear. And are you at university?
College.
College, cool. Is
hmm
that is that the same as in, are we just getting our terms?
Oh no, well, I mean, kind of. I mean, I guess college is more like hands-on, whereas like university
uh,
is more
Academic?
lectures and writing.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, because college for us is 16, 17. And then university, even hands-on type university is 18 plus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
16, 17 here is like high school still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we would call what you're doing university. But yeah, so
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Uh all right. So, and how do you manage like being a student and trying to manage your mental health, or work with it? How do you find that sort of balance?
um, it's been tricky because I've had to make a lot of adjustments and kind of some sacrifices, um, which has been challenging for me because I've always been a bit of like an overachiever. And so, you know, admitting that I need to slow down or modifying my workload so that I could, not overwhelm myself,
Mm.
that it's been like difficult. Um, but it definitely has helped my overall well-being. So I've had to kind of, this semester I withdrew from placement just to kind of give myself some space to think and sort things out. Um, and yeah, I've had to modify like my assignments, cut some classes. Um, so yeah, it's a couple of sacrifices, but it's for the overall
Yeah.
well-being, so I can't complain.
Good. Yeah, exactly that. It's making it manageable, but in the long term, it'll pay off.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, okay. So, has there been so far with OCD, like I call like a light bulb moment, epiphany moment, or just something that clicked on either how you view OCD or how you view the treatment of OCD?
Um, yeah, I guess um one thing my therapist said to me during one of our sessions, um, like I guess I was kind of getting caught up in the oh, so OCD was wrong that if I don't turn off the light switch a certain way, like the house will burn down, like OCD is wrong, it's full of crap kind of thing.
Mm.
And then so she told me, she said, well, ERP is less about proving OCD wrong and just kind of equipping you with the skills to sit through the uncertainty and the anxiety.
Yeah.
And that was something that wasn't apparent to me before. I thought ERP was like, oh, we're going to show OCD who's boss and like
Mm.
we're going to prove it wrong. But no, it's increasing your ability, like those skills to sit with anxiety, no matter how intense it gets.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really valid point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are some therapists that will take that other approach, but um, yeah, okay, it's interesting. And then the opposite of that is, have there been any roadblocks to to get you to where you are now? And if so, like, how did you overcome them?
I think one of the biggest roadblocks that I'm still working on overcoming is not downplaying my disorder. Because for a long time, like the people in my life and doctors kind of like downplayed the severity of it. And so I started to pick that up and I was like, oh, it's just some minor anxiety, like everyone has this level of anxiety, I'm sure of it. And like I just wanted to believe that it was normal.
Mm.
But as I began ERP and like I developed like the hierarchy with my therapist and like started putting the work in, the kind of gravity of everything kind of hit me.
Mm.
And so that was kind of like two steps back for my therapy or my recovery, because I had to kind of grieve through just how big OCD is and what it is that I'm up against.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Well, yeah, that's such an important message, because I think there's a lot of people that downplay their suffering, whether it's OCD or something else. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people will resonate with what you just said.
Yeah.
But it's good. It sounds like you're starting to own that and appreciate how hard it maybe has been for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm learning to accept that there's nothing wrong with saying like I have this disorder. I'm like I have a mental illness, and it is very much a part of who I am, and it affects my life.
Mm.
And because I don't know, I see that message out there a lot that like don't make this mental illness like your identity, don't let it consume you. And I mean fair, but it's easier said than done.
Mm.
Like especially when it attacks things you value, or it's shows up in every aspect of your life.
Yeah, yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, and
Hmm.
absolutely, there's always stuff being put out on the internet, and you've just got to decide what serves me and what doesn't. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So, just for the listeners, any words of hope that you would tell them? Yeah.
Um, I would say that you're strong enough for recovery. You are strong enough to kind of take on that process. Um, because I think for a lot of people, ERP can be intimidating.
Mm.
If you haven't experienced it before, like you're literally facing your worst fears head on and resisting the urge to compulse or do something to ease that tension and anxiety. Um, but you'd be surprised at like what you're capable of through ERP,
Mm.
and it'll show you that you're so much stronger than OCD, even when it doesn't feel like it in those tough moments. But it does pay off, like you said before, in the long run.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, on the whole, ERP for some people being intimidating, was that the case for you when you first went into it?
Yeah, like it was weird because like when I first heard about ERP, I wasn't too nervous. But then when I kind of started seeing all the intricate details and everything that it involved, and you know, I guess yeah, putting in the work, it got pretty scary
Hmm.
because there was all these fears that I hadn't addressed for the last 15 years, and now the only way to get like through it was to literally go through it.
Yeah. That's a very good point. You're effectively facing the things you've been avoiding for however long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess you're doing that with new information of this will work, should work, hopefully work, and is
Yeah.
the science of why we think it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was obviously when you're in the depths of it, you don't have that information. So
No,
yeah.
it definitely
Um,
helps having that like external perspective.
hmm,
Mm.
good point. So you can pick if you could pick up the phone and well, how old are you now? If you're okay sharing.
24.
That's 24. All right,
Mhm.
let's do if you could pick up the phone and call the 18-year-old Pamela, what would you tell her?
Oh my gosh. I would definitely tell her that she's not crazy. Um,
Hmm.
that, everything will eventually make sense once, you have that like support, and once you have, when you find your community, I guess. I definitely found a huge community uh with other OCD sufferers.
Hmm.
And that was something I desperately needed when I was younger and I didn't have.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely just say, it does get better, and it's not as impossible as it seems to recover.
Nice. I like it. And then I'll give you another time traveling phone call. Um, if you could pick up the phone and call that 8-year-old the one that was suddenly experiencing OCD and had gone through this stuff, or what would you tell her if you could speak to her?
Oh my gosh, that poor kid. What could I say? Um, hmm. I guess I would kind of encourage her to kind of share what it was she was experiencing and to reach out, as opposed to trying to take on this massive, um, I should say, disability on her own.
Mm,
I would kind of encourage her to reach out and not try and deal things on her own. Um, and like be okay with accepting help and sharing the fact you're struggling and you're suffering. Um, yeah.
yeah, I'm sure she'd appreciate that call.
Mm.
And lastly, then you've got a billboard in Canada. What do you want written on that billboard?
Um, if it's enjoyable or it's quirky, it's not OCD, because there's nothing enjoyable about OCD.
Mm,
We do not enjoy having our closet like color coded or the DVDs alphabetical, because truly I'm the furthest thing from organized.
mm,
I'm pretty like, disorganized, messy. And yeah, like, yeah, it's just there's nothing enjoyable about, your thoughts having so much power and them being so convincing that, the possibility of your mom getting into a car accident from, stepping over the threshold the wrong way, or um like, I guess we're always trying to prevent kind of something bad happening or harm coming to us.
mm.
And that's kind of what OCD is. It's not like there's nothing enjoyable about it. And I mean, if we could help it, I don't think we would choose to have this disorder. I think we would choose to have something a little more enjoyable, like, you know, being extremely organized and clean. And
Mm.
um, I think, like, especially with people who have the contamination theme, we often get the response of, oh, you're just like extra clean, you're a germaphobe. And
Mm.
it's really more complex than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A really good point. Um, yeah, well, that would be a good billboard, and hopefully someone funds it one day and puts it up.
Maybe I
Um,
will.
yeah, yeah. So, I guess lastly, is there anything else you wish you could have said or shared today?
No, I don't think so. No, I was just really happy to be able to come on here and like share with you and share with the community. Because I know there's a lot of people with OCD who are listening.
Mm,
And so just being able to reach out to them and others who are either in their recovery journey or just starting it, I
yeah.
think, yeah, I'm really glad I got to do that.
That's awesome. Well, look, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us with a one-time tip/donation, please go to theocdstories.com/support. All tips, no matter how large or small, are greatly appreciated. Please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NoCD for supporting our work. If you want to find out more about NoCD, head to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories or click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.